earlier this morning. It was kind of a surprise move, to be honest. I really didn't see it coming. Got bought out of his deal with OKC, of course, back in June. Kemba was traded to the Thunder along with a couple picks, and then Al Horford went back to Boston. So after the buyout, Kemba will be coming to the Knicks. It looks like it's going to be for 2 years between the $16 and $18 million range. I think that's a pretty reasonable deal. Of course, we talked about it off the top as well. Kemba's a local guy, grew up in the Bronx, played at Rice High School in Harlem. Infamous for his time at UConn, the Big East tournament, 2011, that famous shot. That's where the whole cardiac Kemba thing started. So Nick, you mentioned it a little before in the intro, but let's kind of dive into it here. Your thoughts right off the top about the Kemba deal, the potential money situation, and how you see him fitting in with this team.
Yeah, so I'll start quickly with the money. If the deal is true, what you just said, I think that's perfect. He's going to need some money, of course. He is a relatively big name. Definitely not max contract worthy, of course, but that money is good. I like the length of the contract, too. It doesn't really lock you down into anything with him. 2 years, I can't imagine they'll get rid of him in the next 2 years, but I think it's an easy, secure sort of contract for him to have. As far as his productivity, I think the most simple way to say it is I saw a tweet saying, Knicks fans, if you are not happy right now, you're just a miserable person. You went from Elfrid Payton, and we talked a little bit before the show. You went from Elfrid Payton as your starting point guard to now Kemba Walker. A major upgrade in every way, shape, or form. Elfrid Payton in the playoffs didn't even get time because he couldn't contribute.
I think a mop with a bucket for a head would be an upgrade over Elfrid Payton right now. So I'm very
absolutely
happy.
So I again, I don't necessarily mean to slander Elfrid Payton, but he's just
I do. I don't care. I'll do it. You want to do it, I will.
I think he's just not good enough to be a starting point guard. The Knicks arguably had the worst starting point guard in the league last season. And then they started Rose in the playoffs, but I personally don't like Derrick Rose starting. I want him on the bench. He's a sixth man of the year candidate, I think, every year for the next couple of years if he stays on the bench and he's healthy. And Kemba and him now rotating as the starting one and the bench one, I think is just fantastic because it's scoring threats at that point guard position no matter what. There's always someone in at the point that you not only have to worry about distributing and facilitating an offense, but scoring the basketball as well. With Peyton, that was not it. So I think Kemba is just, I'm fingers crossed. He averaged 25.6 points a game in 2018-19 with the Hornets. And then he went to Boston. This past season, he averaged 19.3. So a little bit of a down in scoring, obviously. But he was also hurt. He had some knee issues. Knock on wood again, fingers crossed, none of that happens. You're hoping for the best for any player in the league, but obviously in New York now, I think Kemba can be just so great. In the spotlight here, as we said, the cardiac Kemba name comes from him being in Madison Square Garden with that shot. Hopefully we can see some shots like that. And I think really, too, he's also another great leader, a leader in that locker room, a great leadership type of presence. And pair him with Tom Thibodeau, Tibbs gets every single ounce of every player, gets everything out of them, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think, definitely.
Kemba's not a spectacular defender. I think that's no secret. Who knows? Maybe he becomes better under Coach Tibbs. You have no idea, but he gets the full potential out of each player because that's what we saw last season with this Knicks team, who no one thought was going to make the playoffs. And now there's a lot more talent. Kemba, Fournier, which we'll talk about. I think it's just great for these guys to have him. He's just not necessarily a perfect fit. There's no perfect fit besides some, you put LeBron on a team or something. But he's just a great fit for this team in I think, every way, shape, and form.
Yeah, look, you hit the nail on the head. There's not much more I can add. I think it's a pretty good signing, especially given the low risk factor with the money and the Elfrid Payton replacement. We kind of have both talked about that. But now I kind of want to talk about a little bit of the negative side, which is some of the concerns that I have with this deal. Money wise, I'm not concerned. We were talking pre-show a little bit. The old Knicks, what they would have done was they would have traded for this old contract before the buyout. Yep. They would have been saddled with that $74 million that was left. That's the previous. That's like I don't know. I'm just going to say Phil Jackson, but I know he really wasn't big into that kind of stuff. But that's the first name that comes to mind. Just like a Dolan taking too much power move, I guess would be the better example. But here are my concerns about Kemba, and I'll be honest. You mentioned it, the knee injury. He played only 43 of 72 games last year at Boston. That's concerning. He missed 2 playoff games in that final series with Brooklyn. Obviously it wasn't a very close series, but that obviously is a concern as well. And he's 31 years old. And, you mentioned Tibbs, like the leadership, which is great as well. But, maybe that relationship, Tibbs like leadership, I get that. But my concern is, Tibbs is known, his guys, they play, the starters, they play. He rides those minutes up. Julius Randle got ridden into the ground, whether that had anything to do with, his poor playoff performance, who knows? But my concern is with a guy like Kemba, who is older now, who has had some knee issues now, is Tibbs going to be able to treat him with the right gloves? And when you look at it from this point of view as well, you have Kemba, he's going to be your starter. And I think, like you said, Derrick Rose is best off the bench. But then you got your top 2 point guards are guys that are older. And I mean, not Kemba, not so much, but guys with knee issues. And, basketball and knees, I mean, those are those are the things you got to take care of. So, my concern is as a Knicks fan and just as a basketball fan is like, I think this move is good for the Knicks. You got a guy, and you said it, who can create shots, who is going to take some of the load off of Julius Randle, help with the offensive production. But my concern is, what is going to happen now with the injury? Are we going to be able to get some minutes? And then let's say Rose is hurt. Let's say Kemba's hurt. What happens? You're going to be relying on quickly in year 2 and, a rookie in McBride. Is that really the best combination?
So I think I've got a perfect counter for that, and it's what the Knicks would do oftentimes last season. I think year 2 quickly, hopefully, does make a big jump, as you hope for any year 2 type of player. However, he's not necessarily. I would see him more at the 2. I don't see him really as a on-ball point guard. I think he's a 2 guard. What we do have for the Knicks in the backcourt is Alec Burks re-signed. He would take some minutes at point guard, and he was very stable there. Not necessarily a fantastic facilitator, but he was a very good, just controlled the pace. I don't necessarily love him there because I want him shooting the ball. That's really why the Knicks have him. But he's locked down. I believe it was 3 years, $30 million they re-signed him for, maybe 32. But he can take that role as well. I think maybe the Knicks do some sort of approach where if Kemba can't handle those minutes, they do something like what they did with Peyton, where he starts and plays the first 6 minutes. Rose comes in and plays the next 12. Then Kemba comes back, plays the next 8. They balance it in some way like that. I share your concerns like that because Tibbs does, he wants the most out of his guys. You'd see Randall and Barrett playing 46, 47 minutes in some games that really weren't even that important, I guess, to the next season. So you do worry in that sense, but I'm hoping, the guys, this team is basically the same plus a few pieces. So I'm hoping, the mold and that chemistry and the toughness and bond between these guys should be able to, fill the shoes where someone may not be. Hopefully that won't have to happen, of course, but if it does, I think the Knicks have the guys suitable enough to be able to step up.
Yeah, I mean, well, first off, real quick, I almost said Trey McBride, the journeyman NFL receiver, Miles McBride. So just a quick correction on my part, Miles McBride, who they drafted out of West Virginia, obviously. But, you mentioned it as well a little bit here. They're bringing a lot of these guys back. I mean, they brought back Alec Burks, who I think, at times was big for them in the playoffs. At other times kind of struggled for them. 3 years, $30 million. They're bringing back Nerlens Noel, a lockdown defender, a great hustle guy who I love on the team. And you're bringing back Derrick Rose, who obviously already talked about. And, of course, Mitch Robinson, hopefully he's healthy this year. That's also a big key. I mean, what you're hoping is you basically have the same core. This is the core that got you the 4 seed, that got you this great regular season. The question is now, can Fournier, who, what more else can we say than he's here for shooting? He's going to help with 3-point shooting, all that stuff. You're hoping that Fournier and Kemba can elevate this team a little bit. I don't really know how much more you can expect out of it. I think, like you said on the top of the show, the East is stacked. So I don't really know how much of a higher seat you can expect. Maybe we get to the trade deadline and there's a big trade coming and we add to this core that we have now. I don't know. But look, I think overall, if you're a Knicks fan, you have to be pretty happy with the way that the offseason has gone so far. And, I think you can't knock bringing in 2 guys who are total upgrades over what you had. I think if you're a Knicks fan, you have to be pretty happy.